and I had like 15 missed calls from my doctor within like the past 2 hours. And yeah, I called them back and I was like, hey, what's up? And they're like, this is an emergency. They're like, we've been trying to call you for hours now. They're like, you need to go to the hospital. I remember laying in bed being like, fuck, I'm either going to die in this room or I'm going to die in a hospital.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by Jackson, a.k.a. Supernal Era. Jackson is a world-traveling wizard, mobility and vitality specialist, a creative entrepreneur helping make a more vital world through holistic coaching and content creation. Not only is Jackson doing important work, but his personal story is powerful and almost mythological at times. I'm excited to get into all that and more. Jackson, welcome to the show, bro.
Legend, bro. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's been an honor.
Yeah, our initial connection, I don't know exactly who messaged who first or how the mutual began, but of course the intersection was online initially. And I think it was it was before my first time in Bali, so it would have been before end of 2023 when I was planning for that trip, or you kind of detected from my social media that I was going. You were like, yo, bro, I've traveled Southeast Asia a bunch. Like, I recommend this, and this. And we remained in touch. And then this time around, we both found ourselves here. So it was cool to connect in person. I kind of had no idea. Obviously, at that time, you were also still an anonymous account. I had no idea what you looked like, but also like who you were as a person. And obviously, since getting to know you, I've really enjoyed spending time with you as a friend. Like, there's layers and layers of experience and also character that I think are awesome. And there's a lot of like levels of alignment. And I'm excited to kind of get into that stuff today.
Hectic, man. What an intro.
It's my job, bro. It's my
Sick,
job,
man.
But yeah, I before we get into like the story, I suppose that is like very much tied to your origins and stuff. I did want to ask just personally, where does Supernal come from? Like, where does the name Supernal Era? What is that origin story?
It's a very interesting one, that name. It took me a while to figure it out, but I knew that, like, being humans, we were meant to be so much more. Like, we weren't supposed to be of just this reality, if that makes sense. So I wanted something that was a bit more impactful, something a lot more deeper. So Supernal basically means of, like, they're angels. They're like higher beings. They like dwell in like a higher realm. And so, like, me believing that we can like go out of our body, we have like abilities to be able to like do telekinesis or like anything else, astral projection and stuff like that. I was like, cool. Like, I don't know, to me that was proof enough to be like, we are more than just humans that we set to believe ourselves to be. So I was looking for something a bit higher because I believe that we all have that ability to tap into. So Supernal Era was like the shift of thinking that we are of this, I don't know, 3-dimensional plane to like something much greater. And that's through health, through mindfulness, meditation, through all these ancient esoteric practices and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess that's how Supernal Era came about.
That's super cool. Yeah. And I think that there's no coincidence, like the era thing, like we're kind of moving into this space where it's more widely accepted. Cause like I remember growing up in the age of like the peak new atheist movement, it was like very not in vogue to believe in God at all. Like pretty much if you expressed any sort of supernatural belief, you were a bigot or you were dumb or whatever. So like I was raised in Christian education and it was like this little echo chamber, and I kind of had my own dissonance with Christianity itself. But I do remember like coming to college, like I was hesitant to going to like a secular public university, like a massive school. I felt almost like internally hesitant to say I was like went through Christian education or like had a belief in God. And I think that that's only now wearing off, but it seems to be, and maybe it's just the groups I find myself in person online, but it seems like there's a big raising of consciousness that's going on right now, and a lot more prominent and popular figures are mentioning God and potential additional realms that exist. I mean, we were just before this talking about Huberman as an example, right? He's somebody who's still in a legacy institution. He's predominantly credentialed in all of these kind of secular ways, but even he, in like a public way, has admitted that he believes in God and something else that's going on. So it's cool to see that shift back, that pendulum swing back, because it seemed like within my own lifetime, and I'm not that old yet, like it seems like a decade ago it would have been like the complete opposite.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like the woo-woo and crazy now is starting to become the new normal. But it's always been around, you know. The woo-woo and crazy has always been there. They've always been labeled as like the crazy hippies, or even like witches being burnt at the stake. And it's like, I feel like if you weren't like either getting the death sentence or getting burnt at the stake like 400 years ago, then I don't know, I feel like you're missing a whole point of life, you know. Like, yeah, there's so many like mystical, magical, wacky things out there that we're still yet to discover, or we already know of, but more and more people are starting to tap into that. And I feel like it's a beautiful thing, because it's kind of rare to come across people like that. And when you do, it's like you just bond on like such a deeper level then.
Was this something that was present in your home growing up? Like, were you raised with any sort of spiritual or religious practices?
My parents were heavily Christian. But what kind of sparked my mind with all of this stuff was my house was haunted when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And I saw ghosts, I experienced ghosts, I felt that they were there. And I have always had like a sensitivity to like these types of things happening in other people's houses. And so that kind of just sparked in my mind, like there is something bigger out there that we know of, like of ghosts and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, how do they exist? And they've been spoken about in many ancient cultures and religions, especially Christianity, as like demons and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it's quite evident. And then also my auntie, she's a medium. So apparently she has guides with her that she can communicate with that only she can see. And there's like small like breadcrumbs all around, but it's just a matter of whether you can tune into that and, I don't know, piece the puzzles together. And yeah, it's quite fascinating, because I don't know, all religions I feel have this like sort of otherworldly experience with gods and stuff like that. And it's like, I feel like it's too much of a coincidence to not believe that there is something higher at play there.
Yeah. There's obviously like that meme that goes around the internet, like, I'm an esteemed pattern recognizer. That has implications otherwise outside of spirituality. But I think spirituality is a great example of it, where you could spend your entire life and career trying to dismantle using like a weapon of science, trying to like find a study to disprove the thing, but then it's like, okay, but what about this thing? But what about this culture? But what about that? And like, the more you go down the historical rabbit hole and the subverted historical rabbit hole and what we may have potentially come from, like a more advanced race, like potentially hyper advanced ancient civilizations that might have been interdimensional or super powerful in some sort of way. It becomes this thing where it's like, am I just going to ignore the patterns here? Am I going to ignore the presence? I think it almost is more arrogant when people flat out deny the existence of a supernatural. Like, it's a whole other conversation to define like who or what is God. I think there's arrogance on that side of the camp as well. There are people that are like, you have to use these words and pray in this way and go to this church. There's an arrogance and a control aspect there, which I think is what turns a lot of people off from faith and spirituality. But yeah, I think like in Buddhism, the phrase the middle way is kind of the best thing or the truth is in the middle way, is the best practice with all this stuff. Like, it's not either or, it's yes and. And like the only way you can ride the duality or the paradox is actually just walking the way, like walking that middle path. And I think what's cool is like, if you just give yourself permission at the beginning to say like, maybe maybe something's going on. I'm going to walk and see what those little winks and those little synchronicities and those little like windows start to appear. You open yourself up to the possibility. And I think like in science, they call it cognitive bias. Like if you think it's possible, it's going to happen. Well, in the spiritual world, they just call that magic. Like, I think that where it becomes a semantic battle, and I just like to live personally now in a world that is just like far more magical and romantic, simply because it makes my day to day better. Like, if I look at a clock and I see repeating numbers, or if I go through my day and I consistently see, I don't know, like pairs of birds, or like little winks, like the same color all day just happens to be poking out to me. Like, obviously that could be what some would call coincidence. Maybe there's a reason I'm preconditioned to believe that at the beginning of the day. Or I could just believe that like I am on some sort of higher path, and these are nods and winks from the universe telling me like I'm supposed to be here, I'm doing the right thing. These little types of encouraging notes. And at bare minimum, I think it just makes your experience day to day better. I think that if you do it long enough, it becomes way more than that.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's so much more exciting, as woo-woo and crazy as it seems. Like, it just makes life a little bit more spicier than what it should be, you know?
What was that development like for you, though? Because it went from, like, maybe just speculation to, like, was it reading some ancient wisdom text? Was there a book that started to unlock things for you?
Yeah, no, it just was, I don't know, being sort of, I mean, introduced to it, like, believing in ghosts and spirits, that there was something there. It kind of just, it was just always in the back of my mind as I was growing up. And then, I don't know, it got to, like, 4 or 5 years ago, when I really started like getting into it more and more, like the angel numbers, synchronicities, and like astral projection, and all these like, I don't know, otherworldly like coincidences, which aren't really coincidences in a way. But yeah, as time went on, I just started talking to my auntie more and more about like the spiritual realm, and then I started like meeting other people throughout my day to day that were like really good at astral projecting, that could remote view, like they could do all these crazy things. And I was like, okay, like the answers are out there, you know, like it's just a matter of me just seeking, finding out, and then eventually maybe I can do it one day. But yeah, like you said, man, like it's funny because the angel numbers, for example, it's really cool because like if you do have an idea, or like you're thinking of something or whatever, and you see the angel numbers, it's like a confirmation of like, oh, okay, sweet, like that's a sign, like I should do that now. Whereas like if you don't really believe in that stuff, you kind of just, I don't know, it's just like you're just giving yourself a feedback loop instead of like being open to, I don't know, signs out there in the world, which I find a lot more funner.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more engaging. And I also, a quote that comes to mind is definitely like, when the student is ready, the master will appear. I.e., like, if you're closed entirely to these concepts that we're talking about, you won't see it. Like, you literally just will not see or feel the magic. So it almost becomes a self-fulfilling thing, like a negative spiral almost, or a downward spiral, where you maybe are like, well, if I would believe if I could see it, but like the premise, the first principle is like you have to believe that it's possible to see it, to be shown these things. And I know that I kind of opened up, at least alluding to the fact that you're a very well-traveled person. And I think traveling the world, expanding your, like literally the video game map of your mind, like understanding that the world is a lot bigger than just like the hometown you were born in or the country you were born in, starts to create a little bit of a wider net for more entropy and more surface area to meet different people with different backgrounds and different beliefs. When did world traveling like become a big pillar in your life? I mean, obviously we are both in a country that neither of us were born in right now. We're in Bali right now. I'm all the way across the world from where I'm from. You're very far away as well. When did the world traveling start to become a thing, and what is like the arc towards that? Well,
that's a good question, but so I don't know, like when I was younger, I was always like the outlying kid, you know, like I always didn't feel like I belonged at home. And so when I finished high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had no idea. And joining the army was like the most appealing thing. And I think when I signed up to the army, it was like such a good opportunity for me to disconnect from my little bubble that I was born in, and then explore a bit more of the world that way. And doing that, meeting so many more unique characters out there from all around Australia, and then having a taste of what it's like being away from home and seeing what the wider world is like for me, I kind of like planted the biggest seed. And then from then, it was like a matter of, well, how do I travel the world and make it like a sustainable thing? So it was just like a matter of finding a job, which took ages, like 12 jobs to get to where I am now. And then, I was in a relationship at the time, and this was like 3 years ago. 5-year relationship. Straight after it, at the end of it, I was like, sweet, like I've got my pillars, I've got my financial security, I've got a job that I love doing, and I've kind of found myself. So I think I'm ready now to depart. Like the relationship was falling apart. So it was just like, I don't know, divine timing.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, man, like had this job, and after the relationship, like there was no way I was going to stay at home with the same people doing the exact same thing day in, day out, like kind of feeling alienated from them. And so, I thought it was like a great time to just travel, start off in Bali, travel the world, and then explore, see where life takes me, you know?
Why do you think, looking back now, you felt so alienated?
Because I was a little bit different from other people. Like I had quite a rough childhood growing up. So it was, I don't know, for a lot of the kids I grew up in, very safe, kind of secure families. For me, I was like, I don't know, going through trauma and shit back home. And so I felt like I had like a little bit more life experience than other people. And plus I was kind of into this, like, I felt like I was a little bit more sensitive, like to my emotional side, and then a little bit more sensitive to the whole woo-woo crazy health world as well. And so, like, I don't know, most of my friends were just drinking every weekend, going out. It kind of just wasn't my vibe eventually. And I fully forgot the question, but
Well, just like, what, looking back now, do you think was a major cause or a big reason for that feeling of alienation?
Oh, yeah, just being different. You know, like, family background, as well as just like having a different sort of like spiritual approach to life. Whereas I wasn't like a bloke's bloke, as people would say. I was more like a sensitive type. So the guy friends that I was hanging out with, I was always there, but didn't really ever feel like I fit in. You know, I feel like a lot of dudes struggle with that as well. But for me, I didn't feel like I fit in with my group that I grew up with. I'm sure like there was best friends in the group that I was good friends with, but when people got together, I never felt like I was fully welcome in the group. I always felt like I was a bit, I don't know, left out in a way. Like the humor and the stuff that they would do, the silly shit that they would do, it was never, I don't know, something that I fully enjoyed. So and then my experience with the army, it showed me that there are other people that resonate with me a lot more. So it was just a matter of like, okay, cool. Like, I know that there are other people out there for me and that resonate on the same level as me, but most of them aren't going to be existing in my hometown.
Yeah. One of my good friends who I've had on the podcast before, Ryan, he often echoes this quote that, like, if you want an uncommon life or are on an uncommon life path, it will be by nature uncommon to find people like you. And I think that that's such an important thing to hold in mind. You know, I can imagine that most of the people listening to this podcast now are either curious about that or are already on some sort of unique heroic mission themselves, curious about things that are outside the norm, exploring things, working on things, different projects, trying to, you know, give your specific gift to the world, which by nature has never been done before. So it's an uncharted territory, and it can feel super isolating, especially when you have no proof of concept at the beginning, to like show people that like what is in your head can be a reality. And I think the thing that helped me at the beginning was just understanding or reminding myself that it's really not, the numbers game isn't in your favor. So just don't place the expectation that every time you go out to a new place or event or a cafe that you're going to find somebody for you. Like there's almost a 99% chance they're all going to be NPCs to you, or all going to be people that don't resonate with you, but you're hunting for the rare quality few, and one like ride or die person that like is a soul level connection, whether romantic or otherwise. That person carries the weight of 100 just like average connections, like knows your name, sees you around, but there's no like depth to it. That was like one thing that I definitely struggled with for a while, and I resonate with like your stories, like always feeling somewhat alienated. And I honestly don't think it had as much to do with what they were doing. It was far more my perception of myself. I think like the way I looked at myself and felt like nobody here gets me, or nobody here gets it. Like why are we all talking about the game this weekend? Like, don't you see that there's like layers to this shit? And I think that lack of appreciation like was hard for me. But what's been awesome about travel is, like you said, you start to find these people and you're like, you know what? You're like me. Like I can see it in your eyes. Like something about you get it, and you can have those crazy conversations. And I think, you know, this relationship is one of those that's like it. That we, without the proxy of the internet and this just crazy interconnected world we live in, like for all intents and purposes, shouldn't know we exist. Like I shouldn't know you're alive. You should be living in a silo in a country completely foreign to mine. But here we are, and this goes to like the metaphysical side where it's like, of course we met each other. Because like the magnetism of like who I became and who you were becoming, of course we were going to cross paths, whether it be for a short period of time or for a relationship that flourishes for life. But yeah, like once that travel started and you were kind of a free bird, once you'd kind of connected a monetary vehicle to make it happen, obviously a lot went down throughout the years, more than probably could be fit in this episode. But a very specific trip that we alluded to at the beginning, and I want to kind of give space to in this podcast, is a trip to Sri Lanka. So tell me a little bit about getting to that country, and I'll leave the floor predominantly to you for this one.
Sweet. Yeah, this is a doozy. So if you're listening to this, strap in. This is a long story. Righto. Well, it started, so basically I almost died in Sri Lanka. But spoiler alert. But it started in Bali. Met some amazing people, like-minded people, which is awesome. I was just like fresh out of a 5-year relationship, so I was just having so much fun. And then met some guys there, and we got along super well. And we're like, sweet, we need to do like a primal weekend out in Nusa Lembongan. And we bought some mushrooms. We went snorkeling out there and surfing, and then we went spearfishing on mushrooms, which was an insane experience, like swimming down to the reef. It was all trippy. I remember I swam down staring at the reef, and I look up and there was these 2 big turtles that just swam across my head, and I was just like, fuck, this is gnarly, man. Anyway, we spent like 2 hours in the water, but my flippers, they were too small for my feet, and so they were just like rubbing up against my foot the whole time, and ended up with like these giant blisters on my foot. And sure enough, the sea ulcers, they ended up getting like crazy infected. And then I wasn't really taking care of it. I was like doing the classic, like holistic way of, not holistic, but like the natural way of healing stuff. But man, if you get your foot cut on a reef, like, you know that you need more than just like honey and coconut oil or like Dettol or something. But yeah, anyway, that just got really infected. It was like swollen, super red. I got photos of it as well, which is pretty gnarly. And then went for a surf out Padang. And as we were walking down the cliff, I ended up slipping. And so all of the wounds and stuff was on my right foot. I ended up slipping and cut the top of my toe open. It was like a big gash. And I was like, oh, no, it should be right. Like, ended up like just cleaning it out with Dettol and then getting tape and just closing it together. And like I was still going out, I was still partying, I was still seeing people, but like I was just limping more and more as time went on. So I was getting super infected, and like there would be nights out where I'd be partying, and then by the end of the night, like my foot is stuck to my slide because there's so much pus that has just been oozing out of my toe like the whole time. And then there was like the last 4 days in Uluwatu, and I went for a surf, which was a struggle, like with a sore, painful foot. Ended up stepping on a sea urchin. Same thing, didn't really take care of it, just let it brew up in my toe. And this was all happening on the right foot. Like I had the sea urchin, the cut, and the ulcers all on the right foot. So I was going through some tough times, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, foot. And then, yeah, so stepped on the sea urchin and then like left it for 3 days. Had my last night out partying, same thing, like pus all in my slide, and I had to get people, like I couldn't walk on my foot by the end of the night. I had to get people to carry me to my bike. And then the next day, went to the doctors and like showed them my foot, and I was like, guys, you need to help me out here, please. And so they looked at my foot and they were like, how long has this been like this for? And I was like, oh, probably like a week, but it was 2 weeks. And he's looking at me like shaking his head. He's like, you should have come in here straight away. And I was like, oh, well. And this guy, like, I swear he had Parkinson's, man. Like, he was cleaning my wound and he had this like big metal scissor, gauze wrapped around it. And as he was scraping my toe, the gauze would like slip off sometimes. And I swear he just rubbed like metal on cut. Like, it was so harsh. And then he had to get a needle and put the numbing juices into my foot. So, because the sea urchin was way too deep for him to like pick out. And as he was putting in the needle, man, like the needle was just shaking, his hand was shaking, and I could just feel the needle just like moving around my foot. It was so painful, man. And then anyway, got the numbing cream in there, and then he was just getting a scalpel and just like cutting a big X in there. And he bandaged me up, set me off, gave me antibiotics, which I didn't take, which was silly. Like, and then anyway, the next day went to the airport, and as it was like funny little side story, but as I was in the airport, there was another girl in there. She was super attractive, and she was limping. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, there's 2 limpers in the airport. How funny. And then anyway, got onto the airplane. And then the chick ends up getting on the airplane as well. And I was like, oh, what a coincidence. She sits in front of me, like in the row in front of me. And then another guy gets on and was like, oh, like, he was like, oh, like, I think you're in my seat. And the chick looks at him and he's like, oh, yeah, I am in the wrong seat. She gets up and then sits right next to me. So I got this like really hot chick next to me. She's like, her whole leg is grazed up. And we instantly just kicked off. Like, I was like, what happened to your leg? Blah, blah, blah. She was in a motorbike accident, and we were just having a mad laugh about it. And then, anyway, as the plane ride went on, like, we were just talking more and more. And then the conversation started getting a bit more intense, a little bit more touching, like, was involved. And then, yeah, like, we just got to that point, and I was like, oh. I was like, oh, have you ever been on the Mile High Club before? And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, look, I really want to. She's like, no, I haven't, but like, I really, really want to. But like, she's like, I literally can't bend my leg. And she's like, I know that cubicle is tiny. And she had stitches like in the front of her knee, so she couldn't even bend her leg. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, that's all good. And she's like, yeah, but I've done something else. And I was like, oh, what? And she ends up like just reaching down in my pants and then starts giving me a wristy on the airplane, which was insane. But yeah, so that was a funny little side story. It was just a massive coincidence that even happened. Like, when have you ever been on an airplane where you've sat next to like a hot chick, or even sat next to someone that you really get along with, you know? So it's just like one of those signs from the universe of like, sweet man, like you're on the right path, like keep doing you.
Sending healing energy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So got to Sri Lanka, and I was quite curious in Ayurvedic medicine, and like I looked it up before, and Ayurvedic medicine's been around for like 5,000 plus years, and yeah, it's like the OG of like. There's like a lot of science that hasn't caught up to Ayurvedic medicine, which was like just really, really fascinated me. So there was an Ayurvedic detox that I really wanted to do, and it was just like to completely cleanse your stomach, like get rid of all the parasites, fungus infections, anything like that. So I was really curious in that, and I was like, cool, like sign myself up to that. But as I was in Sri Lanka, I was like, cool, this is a good time to just like stop doing a lot of things and just try and heal my foot, because like I was limping everywhere. My leg was getting sorer and sorer. But
And you still weren't taking antibiotics?
No antibiotics. I was like going the whole organic route, which was retarded. This is like, yeah, it kind of goes in line with like, you can't be too extreme in one thing. You still need modern science to help you with health, like if shit gets serious. And then, anyway, I went out for dinner and then randomly just met up with a bunch of like amazing people. And they're like, oh, like, there's a party on tonight, you should come. And I was like, sweet. Didn't drink, like was completely sober. And yeah, went out, had a mad time at the doctor's house in Welligama. And yeah, like before I went out, I taped my toe up because I was like, I need this shit to be like secure. Taped my toe up, went out, came back home that night, took the tape off, and I had the biggest blister on the same foot, like just above the huge like sea ulcer that I had. And so that was one of the most painful infections that I've had. And like, yeah, I don't know, I just was not taking care of myself, man. Like I was still going for walks along the beach, and if anyone's been to Welligama, they know that the beach in Welligama is filthy. Like if it rains there's like a thin layer of oil that's like just covers the whole ocean, which is disgusting because everyone's like surfing in it and stuff. And the runoff canals from the city is just like ruined. There's like dead dogs, there's rubbish, there's fucking shit and everything. So yeah, anyway, still doing that. Started my my Ayurvedic cleanse with this lovely doctor, and he was also helping me out with my poor toe. And so anyway, like the first week was just like this big cleanse, and it was like a bunch of different like herbal medicines, a bunch of different like massages and oil treatments and stuff like that. And during that first cleanse, like I started noticing, like as he was giving me a head massage, like so much of my hair was falling out. And I was like, oh, this is weird. So he did this Ayurvedic treatment. It's called the Shiro Dada. And basically you lay down, he pours oil on your forehead and it runs down the back into your scalp, and it's like stimulating growth and all this good stuff for your hair. And he's like, cool, like leave it on there for like 2-3 hours and then wash it off. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, oh, actually, you know what would be really good? Like to stimulate my hair growth even more? If I jump in the ocean, because salt water is good for your hair. Biggest mistake ever, especially in the dirty Welligama water. I jumped in the ocean, went home, tried to wash it off, didn't have hot water, which is like another struggle that you have when you travel. Yeah. Didn't have hot water in the place. Anyway, woke up the next day and I had the biggest bacterial infection, like that broke out all across my forehead, all through my scalp. And then my hair started like falling out even more. So I had like this crazy bacterial infection. I had the infection on my toe. I had the blister, and my foot still wasn't like fully healed. So like at this point, my body was going through shit. The second week comes around, and then we had to do it's like re-nourishing the body, replenishing the gut biome, and again, more like oil treatments, massages, and like different medication and stuff like that. Then it got to the last 3 days, and then it was like 3 days of enemas. So basically they just pump oil up your bum, and it actually feels insane like after it, not like getting it shoved up your bum, but the feeling that you get when it, yeah, anyway, it's really good.
Cleansing the colon, yeah.
Yeah. And then and then like it was quite funny, like the last day, because every time you got the enema, you had to wear a nappy, like an adult diaper. And so like finished the last cleanse the last day, had my nappy on, I went out to a restaurant to eat, and then like met another, like this dude just approached me, and then he's like, oh, come down and have dinner with us. I was like, oh, I just want to make sure that it's like only a small amount of people, because I'm feeling oily, dirty, sick, my foot's sore, and I got a fucking nappy on. Then anyway, like did like a whole, like went down there, it was a whole social thing. Ended up talking to a girl, and she was like super into like the stuff that I did, and then she was like, oh, what's like one of the most embarrassing things that you've experienced? And I was like, you're not going to believe this, but I'm currently wearing a nappy now. She's like, you're kidding me. And sure enough, showed her my nappy, and she was into it, which was pretty funny. And then anyway, that last night went back home, and this was like the beginning of the end of like, not the end, but like the beginning of it getting like just significantly worse. So that night, when I went to bed, every hour I would wake up, and like as I would wake up, I would just get dizzier and dizzier, and I needed to piss like crazy. And my head like had the craziest headache as well. And then I barely got any sleep that night. Had to wake up the next day, drive 6.5 hours to Aragon Bay, which is like the east side of Sri Lanka. And the whole car ride, I was like in the back seat, lying down, like just my body was just in so much pain, like the thumping headache. Like I've had my fair share of headaches. Like I'm 28, but this was on like a whole new level. Didn't really think anything of it at the time. But anyway, drove the whole 6 hours there, shivering like crazy. And then I'd get him to turn off the aircon. He'd wind down the window. Then I'd just be sweating balls. And then got to the Airbnb and spoke to the Airbnb lady. And I was like, look, like I'm in all sorts right now. I was like, do you mind if you cook me food? Because it was advertised that my place had a kitchen. Didn't have a kitchen. She had a kitchen. And I was like, look, you advertise this, like, can you please just make me some, I don't know, granola or something. She had a little restaurant, like, out the front of hers as well. And, anyway, like, I was laying in bed, like, just deep breathing. Like, it was the only thing that was kind of, like, calming me down through, like, this headache and this crazy body ache. She brings me my food. I get up, I grab the plate, and I'm standing there just, like, wobbling like crazy. And, like, you know how sometimes you get up and you get a mad blood rush and you kind of like just got to breathe through it and whatever? This was like, it just wasn't going away. And I was like wobbling, holding this plate, and she ends up like grabbing the plate off me and she's like, you need to go sit down. So I sat down on the floor and then ate my food. And then that night, like went to sleep. She was like, you probably need to go to a doctor. That night, went to bed, zero sleep as well. Like I was just in so much pain. The headache, like, bro, was like gnarly. It felt like someone was just getting nails and just like punching them into my brain, like with the slightest sound. Could not look at my phone whatsoever. Like the light sensitivity was insane. And then went to the next day, got a tuk-tuk, and like I was delirious, bro. I couldn't even think properly. Like when you're in that state, like you just like delirious. You can't think properly. You can't do much. And I ended up like hailing down a tuk-tuk driver. I was like, hey man, I was like, look, I need to go to a doctor. And he's like, yeah, no worries. Like I'll take you to my family doctor. And I was like, sweet. Like I was just dead in the back of the tuk-tuk. Like, cool, man. Like, let's go. He ends up taking me to this like family doctor, and it was in their house. Like it wasn't even like a proper facility. He had like a little like table with like a bunch of medication and shit on the front. And the doctor looks at me and he's like, he's like, have you had anything to drink? And I was like, yeah, I've been trying to drink. He's like, have you had any water? I was like, yes. Had anything to eat? And I was like, yes. And I was like, I haven't slept for like 2-3 days at this point. And he's like, okay, no worries. He checked my temperature and he's like, what the hell? Like he kind of freaked out because it was so high. And he's like, come with me. And then we end up like walking into this dude's kitchen. Wife is cooking food in there. There's this dusty green bed and he's like, lay down there. And I was like, okay, like lay down. He goes into his pantry, pulls out this like IV drip and then hooks me up. And I'm like, I'm laying there going, wait, what the fuck am I doing? I was like, I'm in this dude's kitchen. The wife's cooking food in the kitchen and I've got this drip like hooked up to me.
Like intravenous IV.
Yeah, like straight in the vein. Wow. And then it was fine at the end of it, but I was lucky I didn't wake up with like fucking stitches in my stomach or something. And then anyway, he gives me like 12 different types of medication. And he's like, yep, cool, like come back tomorrow. We can do a blood test, whatever. So I went home, and at this point, bro, like I'm pretty conscious of what I eat. And like I was in such desperate measures to like get like more sustenance in me that I was buying like, you know, there's like little packet yogurts and they're like full of sugar and full of shit. I was like buying them, man. And like, cause at that point I was like, bro, like my body needs something, and it's so hard in Sri Lanka to find like good quality food because it's not really like a developed country. And so yeah, got back home. Then day 3 rolls around. Still zero sleep whatsoever. But it was actually kind of cool. There was at the accommodation there were these 2 kittens, and they were like the best kittens in the world. Like they would come to my door and meow. I'd let them in. One of them would just be like constantly running around like the mosquito net that I had around the bed, and the other one would just lay on my chest and purr and like rub its face up against my face, and then would also suck on my nipple. And it was crazy, but it was kind of like keeping me alive, you know. I was
Little
like
spirit guides.
Yeah, I was like laying there like trying to breathe like in so much pain, and then this little kitten's like purring on my chest and sucking on my nipple. It was super random. And then so so that cat was like amazing. And then day 3 rolls around, and then at this point my stomach starts burning, like crazy burning in my stomach. Went to the doctors, saw this doctor. His name was Mr. Happy, and he was a legend. He's like, most of the medication that you're taking is like, you don't need it. Got a blood test off him. Went back home, and then like that afternoon sent me the results. He's like, come back tomorrow, we'll do another one. I was like, cool. But yeah, at this point, like my gut was burning like crazy, and I was like vomiting as well, like dry gagging, which was like even more painful because my body was like already in so much pain. And like I was just going through it, man. Like my body was aching, my foot was infected. Like the shower that I had was just pouring out brown water because it was just like this little house that was just built like in the middle of the jungle. And then like day 4 rolls around, and then I got the blood test back, and he's like, all right, I think you've got gastritis and leptospirosis, and they're like quite severe like bacterial infections in the body and like a complete deterioration of the gut lining. So my immune system at this point was shot. Like it was really, really bad.
You've been sick at this point for like 3-4 weeks.
Oh man, yeah. It's like a good month that I was like my body has been fighting like crazy infections, and it's just been stacking at this point. And then so day 5 rolls around, still 0 sleep. I was like 5 days no sleep. That day I started hallucinating like crazy. I'd close my eyes and it would instantly take me into this like these crazy worlds. And I remember this one super vivid one, and I think it was quite important because it just happened. Like I don't know how much time went by, but I closed my eyes and it took me off into this world. I was like in the Blue Mountains in Australia, and I was this little kodama, like this tattoo on my foot, and like I knew I was an angel in this world, and I was like flying around. I could smell the air, I could feel wind like rushing through my hair, and I'd like fly around and like swing up into trees, and I was just laughing so much. And like I'd swing up into trees, look at like possums and stuff sleeping, and then swing back down and like continue flying through the mountains. And then I was sitting at this waterfall, and I was meditating at this waterfall as like this little kodama, and then all of a sudden this like spear goes through me. And it just kind of like, my body was kind of like air, you know, like the spear just went straight through. And then I turned into this like big beast and just like grabbed these, like they were local Aboriginals. And I grabbed them and I was like, how dare you throw a spear at an angel? By the way, this is all like this weird vision I had. I was like, how dare you throw a spear at me? And they were speaking Aboriginal, but I could understand them clearly. You know, they're like, oh, sorry, like we thought you were the demon of the land. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, it's changed back into my little kodama. And I was like, oh, did it have red eyes or blue eyes? And I was like, red eyes. And I was like, cool. I was like, that's who I'm looking for. Like, where is it? And they're like, oh, we don't know. We thought you were it. And then, like, I ended up, like, crafting these big, like, light spears out of the sky. And I was like, gave it to them. And I was like, give these to your finest warriors. And next time you see the demon, like, throw these spears at it. And so, like, we ended up, like, having a small chat after it. And then I was still sitting on the spear that was punctured into the rock, like did a backflip and then like flung myself up, like straight up into the air. And as I did that, I saw something else fling itself up into the air, and it was like red. And I was like, oh, this is the demon. And so like I changed my whole body into like, I had giant wings, I had shield, I had armor, I had this big sword as well. We ended up like clashing up in the sky, which was like super intense. And like you could like feel everything. It was quite insane. He ended up like disarming me. Weapon went flying down to the ground, and then I ended up like kicking him straight down to the Aboriginals, and I was like yelling out to the Aboriginals. I was like, throw the spears, and they end up like throwing the spears. And at this point, like my body was wrecked, and I was falling down, and then like the spears hit the demon, but like wrapped it up and then sent it flying back towards me. And then the demon ended up like grabbing me in the air with its like all these tentacles and shit, and I was like, oh, this isn't a good situation. So I ended up like growing all these eyes around my body just to see if there's like, I don't know, some sneaky dagger that's coming around from the back that's going to stab me. And sure enough, it was. And then somehow I managed to like cut all of his tentacles off and then like summon this big like lightning bolt from the sky and just like struck this demon. And then like we're both falling and this big beam of light just come through and just picked us both up and took us away. And then I woke up, like kind of like came out of this weird vision, which was super random. And so yeah, day 5 comes around. I go to the doctor to get my my blood test, and got the blood test. Went back home that day, and like, mind you, like every time I would step out of the house to go get like food, to go to the doctors or whatever, I had to lay on the floor naked with like my shirt, wet t-shirt over the top underneath a fan to cool my body down. And then like when I felt like a bit of coolness, I would like quickly get up and then like walk to the nearest like cafe to get food. And then yeah, so came back from the doctors and I was like, man, I just want to be in the sun. Like I just want to have my feet in the dirt. Like I've been in bed like breathing and trying to like calm myself down for like days now. So went out into the sun, stood there for like a minute, and then just collapsed. Like everything just dropped, and I just found myself like hands and knees like in the dirt. And I was like, fuck. I was like, if I pass out here, I'm dead. Like I'm just gonna cook to death. So I had to like crawl my way back into shade and then back into my room, and then ended up just quickly jumping into the shower to cool myself down. And then after the shower, jumped back in bed, and I was shivering like uncontrollably. I had zero control over it. And as I was shivering, like I needed to fart at the time. And so I went to go fart and ended up just shitting myself, like completely just shit the bed. And I was in such a state that I ended up just laying there for like another half an hour in my own shit. And at some point I like just got up, cleaned the sheets, like took all the sheets out, jumped in the shower, and then jumped back in bed. And then the exact same thing happened again. Ended up shitting myself like for the second time. And so yeah, like that night, it was probably like 10 o'clock at night, and got a call from the doctor. I checked my phone, and I had like 15 missed calls from my doctor within the past 2 hours. And yeah, I called them back and I was like, hey, what's up? And they're like, this is an emergency. They're like, we've been trying to call you for hours now. They're like, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, okay, like thinking that I was just going to wait this fucking sickness out. And I was like, oh, okay, look, all right, just give me some time. Like, I'll see what I can do. They're like, we're going to send a tuk-tuk out to you now. Like, where's your address? Blah, blah, blah. And like, I was like, I'll call you guys back in like 10 minutes. Just let me like sort something out. I remember laying in bed, and like I had this Airbnb was pretty chat. There was like 50 dead mosquitoes on the mosquito net that was like getting pushed down by the fan. They just kind of got stuck there. I remember looking at the mosquitoes being like, fuck, I'm either going to die in this room or I'm going to die in a hospital. And then it was looking at the hospital reviews, and it was all like 2-3 star reviews. All the tourists and stuff were like, this hospital is terrible. This is so bad, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, this isn't too promising, you know, like going into a hospital. It's the third world country. It was like their first year seeing tourists after like years. And like they've had a civil war, they've had bombs dropped on them and stuff. So this country wasn't really like, I don't know, if you're looking for like medical professions in a hospital, like something major happened, like it was probably not the best place to be. And so I was talking to my Airbnb host about it. And I was like, fuck it, look, like I've got no other choice. I'm just going to have to go. And then, anyway, it was like me, the Airbnb host, and one of her yoga friends there. And then there was a knock at the door. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And there was a Sri Lankan lady that walked through. And she's like, oh, hello, dear. She's like, my name's Radhika. She's like, I heard about your condition. I really wanted to come and see for myself. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, who is this lady? And the Airbnb host was like, oh, she's like one of my friends. She's usually from Welligama, but luckily she's here. And so she sits down with me. She tells me her whole like kind of background. Like she's an Ayurvedic doctor. She's got history, like 600 years of history of like Ayurvedic doctors in her family. And yeah, she's like, look, I know exactly what's wrong with you. She's like, you just need to trust me and I can make you better. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, fuck it. Like, I don't want to go to a hospital. So I kind of like just went, see you later, like modern medicine, and then just invited like 5,000 years worth of like medicine into my life. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, look, like if you can just get me sleep, like that's all I want, you know, like I haven't had sleep for 5 days. I'm hallucinating. Like my brain is just not functioning properly whatsoever. And so she gives me all these like crazy thick tar, like medicines, that's like all organic and like made out of roots and barks and oils and herbs and stuff like that. And it was lethal stuff, man. It looked like tar, and like the taste of it was awful. And she's like, look, take this every like 4 hours. And I'll be back in the morning to check on you to see how you are. And I was like, okay, cool. So took the medication. Then that night managed to get 1 hour of sleep, which was like, big win. Oh, huge win. And so she comes back the next day and she brings me this thing. It's called kolakanda. And it's like a mixture of like ginger, garlic, porridge, kotu kola, moringa powder, and it's like this nutrient dense like bomb. She gives it to me. First time ever trying it, had a sip, and I had like a whole body reaction. Like it felt like my body was just starving, you know. It was like a dry as sponge, and I had this drink and it was just like the sponge was just soaking up all the water. And she checks me again. She like checks my pulse, like my they call it doshas. She checks my doshas and she's like, look, I can see that you're getting a bit better. And she's like, you're really high pitta. She's like, you've been high pitta long term, and I think it's vata, which is like mucus. And yeah, so she's like, she comes in that morning. She's like, I see you're getting better. And she's like, look, I promise I'll come in every single day, bring you breakfast, lunch, and dinner until you get better. And like at this point, bro, like my emotions were all over the place. I was like crying like to this lady because like she gave me sleep, which like made me feel so much better. Gave me this insane porridge kolakanda thingy, which was next level. And then yeah, so it was about a week and a half that she kept coming back, brought me breakfast, lunch, dinner. Sometimes her husband and her kids would come in and deliver me all this food, and it was like such a good vibe. And I still had the kitten still coming around, like sucking on my nipple every now and then, which was interesting. And then yeah, like she was bringing me these super rare like teas that like they could only find in Sri Lanka, and it was really rare to find because when this leaf would sprout, deers could smell it straight away, and that would be the first thing that they would like hunt for. And like she had like people in the village that would go out and find it for her and then bring it back to me. And yeah, had all these crazy teas, all these crazy different types of medication, like, and it was just like the best experience with like Ayurvedic medicine and like how they used to do it like thousands of years ago. And the shit was working like crazy fast as well. And so yeah, it took about a week and a half for me to kind of get a bit better. And she's like, today's your last day. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, anything? She's like, yeah, anything. And I was like, at this point, I had so much more energy than what I did before. Like I had still a bit of a slight headache, but my body pain and stuff was just kind of like receding. And like, I was just feeling so much better. I had so much more energy. Anyway, I grabbed my surfboard, went straight out to Arugam, to the main point, and surfed for 4.5 hours. And I tell you, man, like the experience that I had when I was surfing was nothing I've ever experienced. You know, it was like coming back from death, being in like bedbound for weeks and like not being able to do anything. I felt like a I felt like a child again, you know, like a newborn into this crazy new world. And I was like surfing these really fun waves. I was like chatting with people. I just felt alive, you know, alive again. And then, like went to the cafe after the surf and I was cooked, like ended up having like a 1 hour nap at the cafe, like on this couch, just like in the fetal position. Had this big like granola bowl, which was like life-saving. And then that night, went and seen, I call her Mama Ayurveda. And went and seen her and I was like, look, I was like, how much money do you want? Because you literally just saved my life. And she's like, I don't want your money. I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, I was like, no, like seriously, like how much money do you want? She's like, no, I don't want your money. And I was like, why? And she's like, I'm Buddhist. And I was like, what does that mean? And she goes, it's my duty to help those that are in need. And she's like, when I saw you, I looked at you like you were my son. And like at that point, like again, like the tears just fucking started flying out of my face. And I was like, fuck, that's like super, super deep. But I ended up giving her money anyway. Just like, I was like, because she works on charities and stuff, like helping women, children, and people that are in need. And I was like, look, put this towards your cause. I was like, I can't not give you anything. And she's like, thank you so much. Like, she's like, look, you've got a doctor for life now. And she's like, what happened to you? I couldn't tell you at the start because it would have freaked you out too much. But yeah, she's like, what happened to you? It's going to take at least like 2 years to heal from. And she's like, if you went to the hospital, you would have died. And because she was like the things that were wrong with me, like there was no medicine or medication in the hospitals in Sri Lanka that could have cured me. Maybe back in Australia or somewhere in Europe or whatever, but they didn't have it in Sri Lanka. And so basically I had severe sepsis. I had leptospirosis and gastritis, which are like gastritis is like a complete deterioration and breakdown of the gut lining. Same with leptospirosis, and like my blood was just super toxic. And yeah, so yeah, man, like that was pretty much like me nearly dying in Sri Lanka, finding this beautiful like Sri Lankan doctor and her saving my life. And that whole voyage through that thing was just insane. But that's just like chapter 1 of like discovering why I enjoy like natural health and discovering like the beauty of just being able to help people, like regardless of whether they're going to pay money or not, but just doing it purely out of a kind heart. And also trusting the universe, you know, trusting that the universe has your back through these hard times, and that there's a lesson in all of this stuff. Doesn't matter how like the shit that you go through, there's always a lesson that you can take out of it and that you can use to help other people. and yeah, so Mama ended up like loading me up with all like this ashwagandha rsayanam, which is like one of the most potent ashwagandhas that you can find anywhere. Because ashwagandha by itself isn't nowhere near as much as ashwagandha rsayanam. Rsayanam means like life, and so it's like 26 different ingredients that complement the ashwagandha, and it's like pretty much just natural steroids for the body, for the immune system. And then like a stack of triphala, which was like super good for the stomach, and then moringa powder and this other powder that I can't remember the name of. But yeah, so that was like the journey through Sri Lanka. And then after that was another big story.
Amazing, bro. Well, as anyone who's listening can tell, this is why I wanted you to share this here. It's now my second time hearing it, and it's still equally as impactful and like unbelievable. And like you're still a young, healthy man, and to have that perspective of like an actual near-death experience. I think you and I might have been talking about it, maybe it was another friend, but it's a realization I've come to over the years, especially the last 2, that like our biggest gift to give the world is often from our most painful lessons. You can think of like the gut health expert who overcame Crohn's disease, or the doctor who went into medicine because they lost a parent to cancer. And in your case, like you're doing now holistic coaching and helping people with their internal world, using all of the stuff that you've learned over the years. in no small part because of what it did for you, you know, and you
yeah.
had to go through that pain and that like extremely dark place to come back with the light. Like Joseph Campbell has the kind of hero's journey. It's often referenced in name, but like in the actual diagram he creates, like you have to go into the cave, and when you exit the cave, you come back with the boon, the ultimate boon. But the point of the story is you return back and you give that back to the world. And so yeah, it's cool to see that you're doing it now. It's cool to be even a small part in your journey, seeing you kind of developing the coaching and everything that's going on now. But I wouldn't want to muddy the story much more. I want to leave this here. It definitely begets a part 2 potentially before I take off and leave Bali. But I do have 3 closer questions I ask every single guest. So the first is, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that be and why?
Interesting. Man, like, I don't know. I feel like what I did as I was younger was quite on point, but just experience as much as you can, you know, have fun with it. Don't take life too seriously because you're still so young. You don't need to take life that seriously or think about big future things as much. You know, like when I was younger, I've currently gone through like 12 different jobs, and I feel like a lot of people get caught up in like I need to find the right job. I need to find this one good job, and then that's going to help me throughout whatever. It's like, nah, bro, like just have fun during that job, then on to the next, you know, they're constantly like stepping stones. But yeah, man, like have fun with life. Don't take things too seriously. But also take care of your health.
I love that. Secondly, what is one quote that has always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
Oh, man. Okay. I've got, this was my very first tattoo. It says, embrace challenge, embrace pain. I don't know who wrote this. I've got it on my phone. Can I pick my phone up, man? Yeah. I need to get this. But yeah, there's this one quote that just resonated with me. Like I found it when I was super young, and I've just carried it with me everywhere. And I don't know who it's done by. If anyone's listening out there that knows the person responsible for this quote, this life-changing quote, like, please let me know, because I need to thank it myself, because it's got me through a lot of shit. Okay. All right. So, a life without pain is a life without challenge. A life without challenge is a life without growth. Life without growth leaves stale, stagnant energy. Embrace challenge, embrace pain. Your aliveness is found in pain. And like, man, that hit me at the best, like the most shittest time of my life when I was like a teenager, and then like hearing that, and I was like, wow, there is so much power in pain because you get to learn so much from it, you know? Like a lot of people kind of go through life, they don't experience much pain, so they don't really have that kind of like, or they kind of avoid pain altogether, whereas you need to lean into it. I feel like you get the most valuable lessons from embracing pain. But yeah, favorite quote ever.
Amazing. And then finally, what do you believe is your unique gift to give the world?
I feel like I'm still trying to discover that. But like, I feel like authenticity is quite a big one. And also having this kind of like woo-woo view of the world, which I don't know, I find is quite unique. But yeah, helping people and just trying to help people have fun with life and not take things so seriously, and not be so wrapped up in like worldly things like work and like, I don't know, relationship issues and stuff like that. But yeah, just seeing the small beauties in life and still having this like childlike mentality when it comes to everything, you know, like, I don't know, seeing a small butterfly, or like spending time in the park just rolling around in the grass or in the sand, and just, I don't know, being goofy, you know, like, I don't know, there's times to be serious with life, and there's also times to be like just fucking whatever, man. Like, we're still children on the inside, and I feel like if we let go of that childlike self, then like, I don't know, I feel like you've kind of died in a way, and you're just missing like 80% of why we've been like reincarnated on this earth, is to just experience, have fun, take things lighthearted, and yeah, also take care of yourself at the same time. But yeah.
Amazing. It's crazy how many parallels. I'll encourage anyone who's made it this far to go back to the previous episode about my first mushroom trip experience, because like what you're talking about with the childlikeness is exactly like the main thing that came through. So yeah, so many synchronicities. Amazing time. Thank you for coming on. Where can the people find you, and what are you excited about that you're working on?
Awesome. Well, and thank you so much for having me as well, man. It's like it's an honor to be able to tell my story like this, and meeting you for the first time as well. It's been amazing meeting you. Like it's just great meeting people that are like-minded and I can get along with, like on a deeper level than just surface level stuff. It's like our souls are kind of like speaking to each other. People can find me on Instagram, Supernal era. And one thing that I'm currently working on now is getting my holistic lifestyle coaching up and running. Just pumping out content and just discovering this whole new world of coaching people online, which is super interesting and confusing. Like there's so much that goes with it. But yeah, super excited to work with people. Eventually, I want to do what Mama does and like help people for free, just as great karma. But yeah.
Amazing. All of Jackson's stuff will be linked wherever you're seeing this. Obviously, you found it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube. That's where most of the universe is being built out. But as you'll also know, if you follow me on other socials, the newsletter is now out. You can go to thevitruvian.co, subscribe there. It's a new platform for me to kind of write at long form some of my deeper thoughts and musings, as well as keep you guys updated on the universe. Some exciting projects on the way, more podcasts and whatnot. But I appreciate you taking your time today. I know the real ones make it to the very end. So thank you for spending your time and attention, your most valuable resources with myself and Jackson today. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.